Tonight, parole officers say they are risking their careers to sound a public safety warning. They're saying recent changes in the management of parolees has increased crime and risk on Colorado streets. Tonight, Denver 7 investigates the controversy inside the state's Department of Corrections. And Chief Investigative reporter Tony Kovaleski takes us inside the problems. And Tony, this is the first time parole officers have aired their concerns in front of cameras.
That's because it's so critical and so important. Here's how it boils down, Ann. It's a conflict over recent changes in the state law that has more parolees on the street and out of prison. State parole managers say it's working and public safety is their top priority. Parole officers working the streets disagree.
There's a lot of parolees on the street right now that should be back in prison.
And they're going to continue to break the law. They're going to continue to shoot officers. People are at risk.
I'm making entry right now.
As a parole officer, our hands are tied.
You're hearing concerns raised by 3 veteran parole officers.
This is not something that should be taken lightly.
We've agreed to disguise their identity and alter their voices. They all fear the details and opinions they're sharing will lead to retaliation.
We've talked and tried to have the upper management listen, and we were told that this is the way it's going to be.
They all blame this piece of legislation designed to reduce the number of parolees returning to prison by increasing the amount of community counseling and support.
Unless they break some major law, they're not going back.
A significant change in philosophy. It means in most cases, parolees no longer return to prison for technical violations like failing drug or alcohol tests and missing required counseling sessions. And now cutting off a monitoring ankle bracelet is not an automatic return to prison.
Their biggest fear was going back to prison. They don't fear that anymore.
The goal is to increase public safety.
Adult Parole Division Director Melissa Roberts has a different view of the change in philosophy.
Putting people in prison stops behavior temporarily. It doesn't change behavior.
In contrast to the parole officers, she calls the significant reduction in parolees returning to prison a success story.
It's a way of doing business. Many other states have seen success. We need to continue to work towards that success.
They know what they're doing, and all they care about is the numbers.
There certainly isn't 100% buy-in for the reforms that we're looking to accomplish.
Would you say you have a morale problem?
Yes.
And here's one of the reasons. Parolee Christopher Clifton cut off his ankle bracelet and has escaped supervision. Records show he's a multi-state offender with 30 felonies in just Colorado, including habitual felony escape. He remains on the run. So he cuts off his ankle bracelet.
Correct.
He's got a long history of crimes.
Correct.
He remains on the run.
Correct.
And if you catch him, he doesn't go back to prison.
If felony escape charges are not filed, no.
Why do you think we were sent that document?
Because I think this is a huge deal.
And here's why it's a big deal. This internal document exposes the parole officer's frustration. It says Clifton's whereabouts are still unknown. He may be considered a danger to the public. And a top parole manager, quote, mandated officers to not file an escape filing at this time. There are many parole officers that we've talked to that really question what's happened with Mr. Clifton.
Although we did not choose to file them immediately, we will assess that when Mr. Clifton is apprehended.
Parole officers also questioned decisions before this parolee allegedly shot a Denver police officer back in February. Was that shooting preventable?
It was.
Records show Gerardino Gonzalez as a known member of a notoriously dangerous Denver gang. He violated conditions of his parole 3 different times, but under the state's new philosophy, he did not return to prison. Instead, he received 3 stays in a county jail, all less than 5 days, minor penalties that allowed him to be on the streets the day he's accused of shooting and injuring Officer Rachel Ide. Is that testimony to the program not working?
I think that's testimony to the fact that Mr. Gonzalez made a poor decision. I think it's a testimony that things in the entire process need to be shored up.
When you read the headlines, see the stories on TV about officer-involved shootings, your personal reaction?
Makes me sick. It's very disturbing. These things could have been prevented.
I appreciate their honesty because we live with this every day.
Denver Police Union President Nick Rogers watched portions of the parole officers' interviews.
This needs to be fixed before someone else becomes a victim.
We work in a dangerous business. We work with people who make very bad decisions. Are we going to make wrong decisions based on the totality of the circumstances sometimes? Absolutely.
So ultimately, it's a struggle over parolees' power in public safety.
If nothing changes, what's your concern?
I fear that public safety is going to be a bigger risk.
So with Christopher Clifton, the state has issued a nationwide warrant for his arrest. But here's where the parole officers issued their frustration. When and if he's arrested right now, there is no guarantee he'll be referred back to prison. Parole managers say they will make that call after the arrest. And you can clearly hear the passion on both sides of this issue. A struggle, as we've said, over power and public safety. Parolees caught right in the middle.
With no easy answers.
None,
Right.
but we'll keep watching it because this is an issue that the public needs to
Sure, it
understand.
affects all of us. Thank you, Tony.